So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we are taking out the new Vmoto, as we should now call them, Hunter Pro. You can include in this review essentially the Wanderer Pro as well, because they are the same underneath other than the body. But these are essentially the replacements. They are an upgrade then to the Wanderer and the Hunter that Vmoto had. It might be worth doing a bit of a recap before we go too far, because the lineup has changed, has grown. But essentially, the lineup is now this. The TC and the TSX are the 28 mile an hour bikes, and well, as you probably know, the TC has been around since 2018. It was in fact the very first bike we ever sold in 2018, and then the TC Max came out, which was their sort of flagship bike, and then the TSX came out. Then the Wanderers came out at 45 miles an hour, and that was essentially it. So you had, well, back in the day, as they say, when the TC and TSX first came out, you could de-restrict them to 43 odd miles an hour. And lots of people like that idea, because at 16 you could buy one, ride it on around till you're 17, then redo your test, and then de-restrict it, and you've got a 43 mile an hour bike. The challenge was twofold. One was it did cause an issue with the battery tops and cables, certainly on the CUXs. And secondly, when what was actually originally going to happen was they were going to drop the TC and TSX altogether and have the Wanderer as being either 28 or 45 and then the TC Max. That was the original plan. So there was going to be no more TCs and TSXs. But for whatever reason, they decided that the Wanderer and Hunter were going to be 45 mile an hour bikes. The TC and TSX were going to be stopped from being de-restricted, which is case now, and the TC Max. So it was sort of neat. TC TSX 28, Wanderer Hunter 45, TC Max 60 miles an hour. So all very straightforward. The amount of people we still get asking if they can de-restrict their TCs and TSXs is quite remarkable, because I don't know whether they're still being sold as being de-restrictable, but it hasn't been possible for a good few years now. Anyway, so that was the lineup, and then this is Vmoto UK, decided that they weren't going to do the Wanderers anymore, although they were selling. I mean, we did sell them. They weren't going to do those anymore. They were just going to have the lineup being TC TSX 28 miles an hour, Wanderer Pro and Hunter Pro 55 to 58 miles an hour, and then TC Max at 60. So they've sort of squeezed a little bit not the value of the TC Max, because there's still reasons to buy it, but in terms of spec, it is now quite close. You know, Hunter Pro, Wanderer Pro at 5.2 kilowatts max, which is what this one is, versus a TC Max at 5 kilowatts. This bike has two 60 volt 32 amp hour batteries, which gives you 3.8 kilowatts of capacity versus one 72 volt 45 amp hour battery in the TC Max, giving you 3.2 kilowatt hours of capacity. In other words, on paper, this one has got 15% more capacity than the TC Max, okay, and about the same power. So you could probably argue that the TC Max is going to give you about 15% less range, just on paper. The big difference between them, though, is obviously one has got one battery, one's got two, but the TC Max is 72 volt and this is 60 volt. So I'm sure you know how the battery capacity works, but you do the maths, that's how you can get more capacity in a 60 volt system than in a 72 volt system, because it's down to amp hours. But the TC Max, which is now on its night edition, as they call it, is 72 volt. And what that means, and what I think I'm going to see when we do the speed test as part of this review, is that the TC Max, from an acceleration point of view and how it reaches its 60 mile an hour perspective, will be quicker. Because that's what voltage gives you. Voltage gives you acceleration. And obviously this one being 60 and that one being 72 should translate into faster acceleration on the TC Max. The other big difference between the TC Max and these two is this is hub driven. As I said, 5.2 kilowatt max, but 2.5 kilowatt nominal. So on your V5, you're going to see it's a 2.5 kilowatts. Okay, so don't be alarmed. That is how they measure it. They do it on nominal. They don't do it on max. But yeah, so 5.2 kilowatt max on this versus 5 kilowatt on the TC Max, but with the 72 volts on the TC Max, I still think if you want the acceleration part, the TC Max would be the one to go for. Anyway, so a bit more about the bike. So one of the good things that you get now out of these bikes is the storage. So before, there was little storage. And if you are curious as to why the stash is called the stash, it's because there is storage where you can stash stuff away. Maybe not my choice of naming convention, but that's what they've decided. So this one, although the storage isn't helmet shaped, you do get the charger. You can get the charger into the bike. So it's a 10 amp charger, so nothing really has changed from that perspective. Charging time is quoted as 3.5 hours from a 13 amp plug. And yeah, it's quite handy. The storage is deep, because this bike, one of the other big differences between this bike and, say, well, even the TC Max and the TC and TSX, is there's more to it. There's more presence to it. It's still on 17-inch wheels, but they're bigger profile. But there is more body to it in general. So as you can see here, you know, we've got quite a substantial, and this is the lid, and it opens the opposite direction to the before, so it now opens this way, and it's fairly deep, and the batteries, as you can see, it's quite a big high bike. They've added these onto it, these sort of wings, which is a bit of a thing these days, to add these little wing things, and yeah, so there's enough for a storage. I've got a bottle of water underneath there, I've got a padlock and chain, it'll all go in underneath. One of the other big things that was quite good about this bike now is that previously the Wanderer and Pro didn't have a rack option. So I've been told that the rack is now available for this bike. Of course, that means that it's also available for the standard Wanderer. So obviously a good thing, because you nearly always need storage in these bikes. Okay. Some of the other differences. So, as I'm sure you know, when you get to a 125cc class of bike, which this is from a license perspective, meaning you have to be either 17 or have a CBT and L plates, one one of the things that you're supposed to do on a 125 class bike is have either ABS or combined braking, some form of combined braking. So that means that when you squeeze the right-hand lever here, you get front and back together. What that normally means is that you see on the front caliper, you see two cables going in. One is obviously to squeeze the front brake, and the other is to send pressure to the back brake. They are not doing that on this bike, unlike the TC Max. They have gone for linked brakes. So what that means is you'll feel the levers both move together when you squeeze the brakes. Okay, so it's not wrong or bad, it's just different to what they've been doing up until now, which I'm a little bit surprised about. You would have thought they would have kept to CBS or maybe even added ABS. But ABS is something that's coming for the Stash, which is why it is delayed. We're now in July, mid-July, and the Stash should have been here a while ago now, but it's been put back probably until August, let's say, and then they will bring it out with ABS on it. So ABS is becoming more and more common on electric bikes now in this category. Obviously, if you go above this category, so you're into zeros and all that sort of stuff, it's it's expected and standard. But on these sort of lower class bikes, having ABS is still fairly unusual. Okay, so yeah, so this has got combined braking. Okay. You can still see, obviously, on the handlebars that you've got your two brake chambers. It's just that mechanically they are working differently. Okay. So in terms of riding, as you can see, it's very. I mean, it is an improvement from the TC and the standard Wanderer. It is more responsive. As I said, top speed 58. One thing that I would say about these bikes is that 5.2 kilowatts is still pretty low. It's basically, let's say, 7 horsepower, near enough. And obviously compared to petrol bikes, that is almost ridiculous. But the reason for it, as I've said in the past, is it's just efficiency. If you had a 7 horsepower petrol bike, there is no way you could get to 58 miles an hour in it, because it would just be so inefficient that you would be, struggling. Whereas on this bike, because 90% of what you getting out of the motor or out of the battery and through the controller is reaching the wheel, that's why you can get it. So it's actually almost, if you like, proof of how inefficient petrol engines are. Okay, so yeah, 7 horsepower, it's enough to do the job. We'll do a speed test later and you'll see how it performs. But as I say, or as I think because of the low voltage, the TC Max will be more performant. Okay, so as to range, so as I said, 3.8 kilowatt hours. This bike only comes with 2 batteries, two 60 volt 32 amp hour batteries. They are under the lid there. 2 cables, not one as in the TSX or TC, so you are drawing off both at the same time. When we stop at a light or whatever, I'll show you the dash a bit more and you can see what I'm talking about. But 3.8 kilowatt hours of battery. So if you compare it to the TC Max again, we've got 50 miles out of a TC Max. And as I said, on paper, you would think that you would get 15% more because you've got 15% more capacity and the power consumption is basically the same. It's also a little bit more efficient because there's no belt, no transmission of power. It's direct to the actual hub motor. So let's say you know, best case, it's going to do 15% more, and then maybe a little bit. So 15% more of 50 is 7.5. So you would think that this would do high 50s or above mid 50s in terms of range. Okay, obviously it depends how you ride it and how fast you're going and all that sort of stuff, but that's what I suspect. When the TCs and all the rest came out with their 60 volt 30 amp hour batteries, we were always saying 25 to 30 miles, and because there's more amp hours in these batteries, I don't see really why that would change. So basically, a good bike for commuting into city, as long as you're not really going above a road that requires 60 mile an hour or above, because you might find yourself struggling a little bit there. Okay. Okay, so in terms of other things, so it is on the grant. This is an L3E bike. So it is still on the grant. As to how long the grant is going to last, I suspect it's probably got less than a year to run myself, but let's assume it hasn't. But so you are getting the £500 off. The price is on, well, should be on all the websites, not just ours, should be showing you the price after the grant has been deducted. As in, you pay the price you see on the website, and we will claim back the £500 for you. And the other bit of good news is that this is like a launch price right now. I had a look at the Vmoto website just before leaving, and they're saying actually that the RRP of this bike, I'm not sure whether they've got this right, because I think they might have forgot to take the grant off, because it used to be that this bike's RRP was 4299 after the grant. Okay, so the real RRP was 4799. But then they were talking to me about giving £1,000 off and making the price of the bike 3299. Okay, so the current price until the end of August is 3299, and that's after the grant. So we will claim back the £500 for you. You just pay the 3299, and then essentially you're good to go. Okay, so good news. As you see, it picks up pretty well. I mean, I'm only in mode 1. It's still picking up quite well, and that's a sort of reflection of the 5.2 kilowatts of power. So it certainly is a step up from a TC. I mean, in comparison, a TC and a TSX were 3 kilowatts max and 1500 watts continuous. Okay, so on every measure, this is more powerful. So, so as you can see, it picks up good. I mean, it's mode 1. I'm doing 40 in mode 1. Okay, and that's sort of what I'd expect. Mode 3 is going to get you to high 50s, 55, 58. We'll try that later. But yeah, it's I like the way it rides. It's very smooth. Okay, it's silent. The TC Max again would be making noise, but in terms of actually how it rides, it's good. Okay, so not too many other things to say. We'll stop later and we'll do a 0 to top acceleration test as we normally do. But a couple of other things, other than the price, which was 3299 until for the next 6 weeks. We're also offering actually a tank bag with this bike at the moment. If you wanted one of those, obviously, as I said, the rack is now available. One other thing to note is that they are limiting the choices of colour for whatever reason, and this is purely down to what the importer wants to do. So there are only 2 colours of each of the Wanderer and the Hunter coming in. The Wanderer Pro is coming in as black and white, and the Hunter Pro is coming in as black or red. Other colours are available, but they aren't bringing them in for whatever reason. Okay, so black is probably by far the most popular colour. and we are taking orders for black more than any other colour. Okay, so I think that's probably all for now on this part. As I say, we'll stop later and do a speed test, and then we'll put the times up as we normally do, and then you can see exactly how this does perform, and we'll summarise and you can come to your own conclusions. So thanks very much for now. Right, so we're pulled up in our test track, which is basically the A30 between Staines and the M25. It's national speed limit, so we'll be able to test this to its full potential. Just go around the dash again, just so you've got it all. So here you've got your hazard lights, 3 modes. Mode 3 is going to get us to 58 in theory. Kill switch, master cylinders for the brakes, a USB port, which is a good thing. Horn, silent indicators still, and full beam, etc., etc. Around the dash, you've got your range, which changes with the modes. Mode 1 to give you 130, don't think so. You're more like to get something like 60 across everything. 96% state of charge, how many miles it's done, time, temperature, etc., etc. And then obviously underneath here, which opens this way, you have some storage for the charger, but and maybe a lock and chain, but not a helmet. That's the duty of the stash when it turns up. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're just going to whiz down here, see how fast we get, how quickly we get there. Bearing in mind this is 60 volt and not 72 volt as of the TC Max, so in theory the TC Max would be faster because it's voltage that will give you that sort of acceleration. But let's see how we get on, and then we'll put the times up as we usually do, and then we'll just summarise on the way back. All right. Okay, so it looks like there's a gap in the traffic coming, so we'll let's go. 20, 30, 40. 50. As you can see, the sort of amps out of the battery are sort of flying out. It's on its maximum draw, and as I suspected, when you get these lower horsepowered bikes, which this one still is, I mean it's 5 kilowatts, 5.2 kilowatts max, which is 7 horsepower. The top end of it sort of struggles to do the last remaining bit. So here we're now doing 53, and we are on a slight down incline, 54, 55, and running out of road. 55 looks like the top, and TC Max would definitely be quicker. Okay, so as I said, not too surprised. 60 volt, I mean, if they had made it 72 volt based and then decreased the battery capacity a little bit, they still would have got the same kilowatt hours, but they would have given it more acceleration. But of course then they're tripping over the TC Max, and this is probably part of the summary of this bike and the Wanderer as Pro as well. If Super Soco had all of the bikes, not that they ever did, that are actually still available, you would have the TC and TSX at 28. Previously they were de-restrictable to 43. Then you'd have the standard Wanderer and the Hunter, which were 45. You've now got these Pro versions, which are, let's say, 55. Then you've got the TC Max at 60, and then a gap to the stash at 75. But in that sort of middle ground, it's quite a cluster of bikes. So I can understand why Vmoto have got rid of the Wanderer. I can't quite understand, to be honest, why they've kept the TC and the TSX, because when the Wanderer and the Hunter first came out, there was a 28 mile an hour version of it, and they were going to drop the TC and the TSX. So it was literally going to be this sort of style in either 28 or 45. But for whatever reason, they've kept the TC and TSX for as long as I don't know. Then they've got the Pro versions now. My question is, I wonder how long the TC Max will continue. I mean, it is the sort of most popular electric motorcycle style bike in the country. But I would also say that since the Pros have been coming out, we've been getting more interest in these bikes than the TC Max. So whether it will naturally die off, the TC Max, don't know. They are actually calling the TC Max the Night Edition, which sort of sounds like a, farewell edition. But obviously I'm not the guy governing strategy at Vmoto. Okay. But in summary, it's a good bike. It's a good step up from the Wanderer and the Hunter. It's obviously more powerful, 5.2 kilowatts. The TC Max is actually only 5, but it's the 72 volt in the TC Max, which gives it better performance. And as I said, I get why they didn't do 72 volt in this. Okay, so it's also good value at the moment, 3299 in the UK. We're in July, as you can tell by the glorious sunshine. That will continue for the next month or so, and then it will go to its normal price of 4299 with 2 batteries. They are only doing the 2 battery version, black and white and red. And you have to remember, of course, that the only difference between the Hunter and the Wanderer Pros are the styling. Everything else is the same. Dashboards, layout. I mean, the Wanderer is more supposed to be like a TC classic cafe racer sort of style bike, although it's got much more presence now. But yeah, certainly a step up from the standard Wanderer and standard Hunter. But would you choose this one over the TC Max, I guess is the question. If you like this styling, obviously there's no choice unless you wanted to go to the Stash. If you want the best performance, I would still say it's the TC Max. So it's sort of, I guess, up to you at the end of the day. This one's cheaper than the TC Max right now. It's got 2 separate batteries, which make them easier to get out. It's got some storage for the charger. TC Max can't even take its charger anymore. There is now a rack available for this bike, which there wasn't with the standard Hunter and Wanderer. So yeah, it's the styling. I think that most people will probably choose this one over the TC Max, but performance-wise, it's still the TC Max. Okay, so hopefully that's given you some insight into this bike. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions at hello@green-mopeds.com. Obviously, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for forthcoming reviews, further reviews of the Stash when it turns up. There's going to be a side-by-side of this one and the Wanderer Pro. And thanks very much.